Good morning, all of you. And today we are in the second day of Blue Planet series. This entire webinar series is for the World Oceans Day. And I invite you all to reflect upon today, that is being the World Oceans Day, the importance of the ocean. So I wish you all very warm greetings on the special occasion of the World Oceans Day. And we have a very famous dignitary, perhaps the most well-known figure in the blue economy or the blue biotechnology, the ocean-based biotechnology, the industrialist Shrikumar Suryanarayanan is with us. Please, join me to welcome Dr. Shrikumar Suryanarayanan. He's a very famous dignitary, and he's a founder director of C6 Energy, and he's also, earlier he was with Biocon. You might know it's a very famous biotechnology company, and right now he is managing the C6 Energy as a chief executive officer as well as a director. And as you can see from this slide, let me read out his short biography. He is a managing director and co-founder of C6 Energy Private Limited, Bangalore. The company was founded in 2010 in Chennai by several alumni of IIT Madras and is focused on the development of the technology for the offshore biomass production and conversion to a variety of bioproducts, including agricultural biostimulants, animal health supplements, food ingredients, and renewable chemicals. Shrikumar was formerly president of the research and development and chief scientific advisor to the Biocon Limited, Bangalore, the largest life science company in India, Biocon, for over 25 years. He also served as the chief executive officer for the Translational Health Sciences Institute, that is THSTI. Perhaps some of you know Professor Gagandeep Kong. She is a fellow of Royal Society, and she is the current director of THSTI. As well as it is in the National Capital Region in the biosciences cluster from 2009 to 2010. Shrikumar has BTech in Chemical Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and Masters in Biotechnology from IIT Delhi. He was conferred the Distinguished Alumnus Award of the Institute of Technology, Madras, that is in 2009, and was chosen as Entrepreneur of the Year by Biospectrum magazine in 2012. Shrikumar is also the current president of the Association of Biotechnology-Led Enterprises of India, that is ABLE, since April 2018. That is actually his tenure is up to March 2021. So congratulations, Shrikumar. We are really happy to have you here with us today. And we also have a panelist today. Dr. Punita Pandey is joining us, and she's from Department of Environmental Sciences. Welcome, Dr. Punita. And yes, over to you, Dr. Shrikumar. And thank you so much for accepting my humble request and being part of this Blue Planet series. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And it's actually it's a pleasure to be here. So this is new times in coronavirus, and doing a webinar like this is it's an easy way to do things. I mean, if we had to travel otherwise all the way to a place, then that's just such a lot of time nowadays. And so many times we don't even get to attend such meetings, which are otherwise so interesting. So I'm really, in one way, I'm happy that these changes are happening because they're so much more efficient on our time. So I suppose I can share my presentation, right? So I should be able to do that. And so let me just see. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm actually going to talk about is is what I have nowadays started calling as the next frontier of agriculture. And it's basically, while we are all in the biology field, we're used to talking about um, seaweeds and growing it, but systematically speaking, I would just call it agriculture on the sea. Sea plants that grow in the sea, and there is a whole new economy waiting to get created on how we can use these sea plants to sustainably feed the world, provide, feed food, fuel, energy, renewable chemicals in a very sustainable manner. So that's really what I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the small steps that our company has done in this regard. So let me just step back a moment and talk about what drives the economy. And fundamentally, at the bottom of all of it is energy. Energy is so important. And today, a large part of our energy comes from fossil fuels still. And whichever way you look at it, ultimately, you and I, we just live off the sun's energy. It could be recent sun's energy, or it could be the old sun's energy. And let me explain what I mean by that. Whether you today in our lives, whether we, in every aspect of our daily lives, whether we talk about electricity, whether we talk about uh, petrol or diesel, or whether even we talk about fertilizer to drive our agriculture, all of it comes from some kind of fossil fuel or the solar energy at the bottom of it, because fertilizer is all driven by naphtha. It's used in the Haber process. You use nitrogen to fix nitrogen from the air. Whatever we do, whether we make our factories, or whether we weave our clothes in a electric loom, or whether we run the tractors on the field, whether we fly to a conference, whether we're all using energy. And today, all of that is coming from, say, coal or oil, or maybe of late, renewable wind or solar. When you come to think of it, all of it is driven by the sun, except that the fossil fuel is what we call technically old sunlight, which means the way oil and coal arose was that many plant matter millions of years ago captured the energy of the sunlight, sank into the ground, it became oil or coal. And then today, when we use that old energy, old sun's energy, by burning the fuel or by whatever we do release the old sunlight, so to speak, but it comes with a penalty. The penalty is that we also release old carbon dioxide that was trapped when the plants captured the sunlight by the process called photosynthesis. So ultimately, that's the point of this slide, is that if you look at the total amount of energy that human beings consume today, and you look at the amount of energy that falls on the earth today by sunlight, there is a vast excess of sunlight. We need to trap only a tiny fraction of that energy to fulfill all of human beings' needs. And looking at this map, much of that energy is falling in areas that we are not even accessing nowadays, the oceans. And here is the map tells you, for example, what is the sea surface temperature. And the sea surface temperature is directly proportional to the amount of solar energy that is falling. And what I'm trying, therefore, to say is that the future of human beings is about how we can reliably capture this energy in a sustainable manner for our needs. And all of this is driven, and sunlight falls the way it does. It falls at a certain watts per square meter. You need huge areas to gather it up. And in the tropics, especially where countries like India are located, if you look on the map, these are some of the areas, the seas around this are the richest in terms of sunlight. And what do we know that captures sunlight? Plants capture sunlight. And in the process of capturing sunlight, they capture carbon dioxide from the air. So if we could do agriculture on the sea, this would be amazing, except that we have hardly begun to think about it. So if you can take all this energy and convert it into biomass. So that led us 10 years ago to think about, hey, what are the plants that can reliably grow on the sea? And when you look at it from a point of view of, I need an industrial biomass, it needs to be something that can can be as reliable as for, say, any other raw material, which means it should be available throughout the year. We found that there are certain kinds of plants that grow throughout the year in the sea, and they're tropical sea plants. We are blessed in the tropical areas of the world, which is, I would say, between latitude plus minus 15 to 20 degrees of the equator. There is not only plentiful of sunlight, but there are also these many plants that grow uniformly throughout the year. I would say a little bit like the evergreen forests. And many of these are very fast growing species. Now, those of you who are familiar with agriculture should know that, when you go into large scale agriculture and you have a visualization of large farms on the sea, it's preferable to deal with crops for whom you know the agronomy. Unfortunately, there are plants, and I have listed a few of them here. These are all varieties of rhodophyta, or tropical red sea plants, which are vegetatively propagated. Now, why do I say vegetatively propagated? Is because those are among the fastest growing plants that we know of. We have studied the growth rate of these plants. So they can produce more than 100 tons of biomass per hectare, which is very large compared to many of the uh, um, plants which is land plants. Sugarcane or bamboo is only about 70 or 80 tons per hectare. But many of these sea plants, in terms of dry biomass, can produce more than 100 tons per hectare. More importantly, because they're vegetatively propagated, they can be, and they have very short growth cycle times, typically less than 2 months, typically about 6 weeks. And they can be grown throughout the year. So this is even better than many of the land plants. For example, we know that sugarcane or corn or bamboo, for instance, they're all energy crops today. I mean, they're used to make biofuels, for instance. But you get one harvest of sugarcane in the year, or one harvest of bamboo. And if you want rice straw, maybe you'll get 2 or 3 harvests. And so if you want to run a factory which is producing biofuel every day, for instance, you need to get the biomass and you store it in very large godowns, and the scale is humongous. There's very large godowns, and then you wait for the next crop. But many of these tropical sea plants, because they're grown every day, they're grown throughout the year. You can plant them every day and harvest them every day throughout the year, 6 weeks later. So that's very, very attractive from an industrial crop perspective. So we started looking in about 10 years ago as a company, and that's when I got really excited. I resigned my job. I know I was an advisor to the government after my stint in the as a head of R&D for Biocon. I said I found this group of young students. I was also teaching at the IIT Madras as a visiting faculty, and then I came across this group of young students. We started talking about these ideas. Can we do agriculture on the sea? Turned out to be a very, very exciting idea, and said it's so exciting that we started a company in IIT Madras in 2010. And here we are 10 years later. And I'd like to tell you the story of what we have managed to achieve. So just before I step forward, I did mention that these plants are grown in the tropics. And here is an example of some of the crops that I showed you in the previous slide, whether it's Kappa ficus, Eucuma, or Gracilaria. And this green band represents about plus minus 20 degrees of the equator. And you can see that there are already all these red areas represent areas around the world where these kind of species have been successfully cultivated. Of course, working in the deep ocean is not easy, but you can see that all of these areas literally throughout the world is just waiting. There are these crops that can be grown, except that the technology to carry out cultivation does not exist. And that's really what C6 Energy set out to invent many years ago. So just to give you an idea, in the previous slide, I talked about, say, Tanzania, Indonesia, India to a certain extent, and all these areas. What does the current cultivation look like? So look at this picture. This is a picture that was shot of the coast of Zanzibar in Tanzania, off the coast of Africa. And this is actually shallow reef areas. So you can see that this lady out there is walking about knee deep in water at low tide. And if you can see the slide, maybe just in the horizon there, you can see the white waves. So that's where the waters become deeper. So people actually do the farming of the seaweed in shallow water, sea waters like this. And this boat that this women are bringing is laden full of seaweed. How is the seaweed grown? So there are these in the shallow waters, there are these stakes in the ground that they drive into the ground, and you can just about see these dark shadows in the water here. And that's actually seaweed which is strung on lines, rather like a flower garland. You know, you go to the market and you see people stringing flowers on a string. So people sit down and they string the seaweeds as a flower garland, and they put it down in between these poles that are driven into the ground, and they tie it between these poles, and then the seawater comes up and down, high tide and low tide, brings in nutrients, and it captures sunlight and carbon dioxide. And finally, when harvest time comes about 6 weeks later, it's harvested like this. So that's the way it is grown. It's pretty labor intensive, but this is agriculture on the sea. And similarly, this is another picture which is off the coast of Bali in Indonesia. And again, you can see that this is a picture that has been taken from the sea looking at the beach. So that's the beach. This is a holiday zone. But as you can see, these farmers, this man is waist deep in the water. And all these green things that you see in the water is actually seaweed growing in patches. And this kind of agriculture in the sea is so well organized that you can see that they're in plots, and each family has been assigned some plots. They actually harvest and seed their little plot. And again, walking and working in the water is not easy, because try walking in a swimming pool, you know how difficult it is. So the productivity per person on these kind of areas is pretty low compared to land agriculture. For example, one person can barely do about 10 square meters per day of work. So it's 10 square meters is roughly about 100 square, uh, you know, um, uh, yeah, something about 100 square feet, or it's pretty low. So that's what it is now. But it is, and as you can see, the main ingredient here is labor. There is no other real cost for this agriculture. The seawater is free, the sunlight is free, there is no fertilizer because all the nutrients are in the water. Really, when you speak of land agriculture, what do you need? You need land, you need irrigation, and irrigation is a big problem, right? I mean, sometimes we are not exactly a uh, water excess country, we're a water scarce country. And then we need fertilizer, and fertilizer is also derived from fossil fuels, and it's expensive. So you can see that the main cost in sea agriculture is basically just labor. So the good thing and the interesting thing that we have to see is that if the seaweed biomass, with the way it's currently cultivated, is because of the cost of labor, and because of is at a price, is available at a price where only a few things become possible. So for example, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, nutraceuticals, they become possible. Then today, the biggest use for the kind of tropical seaweed that we're doing is actually for specialty food ingredients like carrageenan or agar. And that's really where the cost of the seaweed is. But just like biomass, seaweed, any biomass, seaweed is also biomass. Technically, there is no restriction on what all you can do with it, provided the cost is right. And if the cost is right, you can go into agri and feed ingredients, bulk food ingredients. You can make renewable chemicals, plastics, you can even make biofuel. But for all of this, the cost needs to drop a lot, and the volumes need to go up dramatically. And that's really what got us thinking as a company, because when you look at sea plant biomass, if I look at the circle in the center, it can be doing so many things, including producing renewable uh, plastics and fuel, but really the cost needs to come much lower. And as I mentioned in the slides before, the main cost is basically labor. Sea cultivation is very labor intensive. Where is the labor involved? I told you that this was already a vegetatively propagated seaweed species. So for example, here is a picture from say Indonesia, where these women are taking the freshly harvested bunch of Kappa ficus seaweed. Then they're breaking off small bits with their hands, and then they're tying it onto these blue strings that you can see here. You can just about see it here if you, so, and then they make it like a flower garland, and then this is going to be put back into the sea. This is a picture from Rameshwaram in India. And you can see this woman is doing almost the same thing. She's taking the seaweed and she's actually tying it with her hands, and it's pretty slow. And it's a family affair. So, you know, the the men, the seaweed is heavy when it's lifted out of the water. So the men bring it there, and then the women cut it into small pieces. Then the men go back into the sea and tie the seaweed, you know, into the waves. I showed you that picture of Zanzibar, right? So they tie it in the water. There are different ways of tying it. And then finally, when the seaweed is fully grown, it's pretty heavy, as you can see. So they bring it back out of the water, and you know, it's a, so it's pretty labor intensive, and that's really why it's also becomes expensive. Um, but all these tasks can be automated. Okay, and that's really what we set out to do as a company. One is we set out to figure out how to lower the cost of seaweed cultivation so that the number of things that it can be used for, that can increase. And then secondly, as a company, we set out to say what are the new applications that we can make from seaweed. So the first thing is that mechanization can lower costs. So as I told you, so we've actually invented and patented a machine which we call as a sea combine. I mean, you know, it's like a combine harvester. And it's actually a boat that it's now deployed in Indonesia. And it has all the equipment to automate the seeding and the harvesting. So while the normal way of tying seaweed is to tie it in a string and, you know, take bit by bit, we get away from that by using what is called a tube net. So here is a picture of a tube net. So, you know, it's basically a tube shaped net with large eyes, and we have an automatic machine which can push the seaweed into the net. So, you know, the speed at which it can do it is much faster than anywhere else. And then these tube nets are actually laid out in the water in long lines. And then the seaweed grows in the tube net. So you can see in this picture on the right-hand side where the arrow is, that the seaweed is growing in the tube nets. So once the seaweed is grown and is put in the water, so you can actually, this is actually a picture of a farm in Indonesia shot with a drone. You can see that you can have seaweed cultivation on a very large scale. So that is the coastline, and you can see this is the sea. And what you see here are ladder-shaped farms where, you know, long rows of seaweed have been laid out and they're growing in the water. So you can have, so, you know, the sea combine can actually go up to the farm and it can harvest all these lines and put it back again. And so this is really the way the seaweed cultivation is envisaged to grow, to be cultivated in a large scale. So this is a picture of a real farm in operation. So how does it actually work? So you saw the picture of the tube net and the seaweed stuffed in that. And actually, when you put it into the water after 4 weeks to 6 weeks, the seaweed actually grows out like this through the tube net. Okay, so you can see it's grown out completely. And then we have the special machine which you can feed the tube net in. And this has got a rotating cutter blade. And what it does is it cuts off the seaweed which is growing through the net. So you get these large pieces, and those large pieces can be put back into a fresh set of tube nets, and they can be reseeded. The seaweed that is inside the tube nets, we just can pass it through a set of rollers, and it breaks it up. And when you shake it, actually all the seaweed falls out, and the tube net is regenerated again, and it can be reused. So that way, the whole machinery can be made to work. And this works very fast. And the sea combine, which I showed you a picture, can actually, in one configuration, it can travel over the farms like that, and it can harvest the lines of seaweed like you see in this picture. And the harvested seaweed can be pumped on shore, whereas the fresh, then, the bits of seaweed that are harvested from the tube net like here are reseeded and put back onto the farms. So that way we can automate the seeding and the harvesting of the seaweed, and be able to do these kind of operations further away from the shore and in deeper and rougher waters than is today possible. One of the big advantages of the tube net is that because the seaweed is supported in so many different places when it's growing, unlike the line method of cultivation, the tube net is able to grow and survive. The seaweed in the tube net is able to grow and survive even in rough waters because it is so well supported. So this cultivation can be carried out in rough waters. So you see, with this kind of automation, we have already managed to lower the price. Whereas today with the manual method of cultivation, this is where the price is. In this year, we expect to bring down the price of seaweed cultivation by using mechanized cultivation significantly down, so that we are well on our way to making, we are very close to our target of making even renewable bioplastics. And in a few years, we expect to go down to the price where we can make biofuel also a reality. So that's really what mechanization can do to bring down the cost of the seaweed. So now I want to shift gears and, excuse me, so talk a little bit about the kind of products that can be made from seaweed. So I showed you this picture. And so let's go and look at some of the kinds of products that can be made from these seaweeds. So if I can switch the slide. Yeah, yeah, right. So here are some of the range of products. So for example, we have made these, there are, starting 2015, we started commercializing products that were for different applications. So land agriculture, we made these two products called AgroGain in 2015 and in AgFort for 2018. Now, AgroGain is a biostimulant that improves the growth of plant, and AgFort is something that um, provides protection to the plant using its own innate defense system. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we have recently launched a product for aquaculture and animal feed for fish, shrimp, and poultry, as well as for cattle. Then we have some prototype gelling agents that we've made from seaweed, and we're very early stages of making bioplastics and biofuels. So let me just give you a quick insight into some of these products, that all of which can be made from different fractions of seaweed that we can grow. So the first one is AgroGain. And what AgroGain does is that it has a the active ingredient of AgroGain is a very specific molecular weight length of compounds that exists in seaweeds. So this is a patented formulation, so the patents are all published. So what it does is that we have discovered the mechanism of action. So it stimulates many growth and nutrient uptake related genes in plants. So we've actually sprayed AgroGain onto a plant. We've extracted the total mRNA. We've quantified what genes have got upregulated, and we've seen that they all relate to growth and nutrient regulation, cell division. As a result, what AgroGain does is that when you spray it on almost any crop, it increases the yield of the crop and the efficiency with which that land crop can utilize existing nutrients. So we have seen, for example, we have tested this product in various Indian institutes of agricultural research, Indian Council of Agricultural Research. So for example, Directorate of Plant Wheat Research in Karnal, Central Potato Research Institute, Modipuram, then there's Soybean Research Institute in Indore, then Rice Research Institute in Hyderabad, then Tea Research Institute in Jorhat in Assam. So we have done it over various things, so several years. And examples of some of the crops where you look at the yield increase. So we get about 10% increase in rice, about 22% increase in sugarcane. So it is crop specific. With potatoes, we get something. With brinjal or eggplant, we get something else. With tomatoes, we get about 20%. Maize, we get about 20%. So depending on the crop, but without a doubt, whatever the crop, we do get a yield increase. And the amount of yield increase is obtained for no extra fertilizer, no extra irrigation, no extra inputs. The farmer gets that just for spraying agrogain, which is sprayed at a very low concentration per acre. Right now, this particular formulation is only 200 milliliters per acre. And the what yield, what benefit the farmer gets is many times more than the cost of the agrogain. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. So this is a very interesting product. We're now exporting this product to the US, to Vietnam, to Sri Lanka, potentially in the future to many other countries. So all these, and of course, it's being sold in India by several of our marketing partners. So a new product that we have developed with the, we are located in Bangalore, and we work very closely with the University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore. And one of the biggest issues in Indian agriculture is viral attacks on plants, for which there are today no solutions. Now, we have all heard of insecticides and pesticides and fungicides. All of these products, these fungicides or insecticides, they actually act against the fungus, or they act against an insect, and they kill the fungus or they kill the insect. And that's why we have to be very careful when these products are used, because they can have unintended consequences in the environment. For example, insecticide could not only kill the harmful insects, but also some of the beneficial insects. Okay, so we have to be very careful. And so most of the agricultural plant protection products that you see in the market today rely on attacking the invader. However, plants have survived for millions of years before man came around spraying insecticides and fungicides on the plants. Plants have their own innate defense systems called systemic acquired immunity. So they have some ability to defend themselves against pathogens. So what we have found is a specific extract from seaweed, which we call Ag Fort. And what it does is that it boosts the ability of the plant to defend itself. So just like an immune system that we have in human beings, innate immunity and acquired immunity, plants do have a immune system, which is stimulated, which is a pathogen defense system. So we have figured out that the specific molecules that we are able to extract from seaweed can activate these plant defense mechanisms. And as a result, especially for plant diseases where there are no solutions today, for example, viral attacks on plants. For, papaya is a big crop in India, and roughly 30% of the papaya crop can be lost because of viral attack. It's called papaya ring spot virus. So for more than 3 or 4 years, we've been working with the University of Agricultural Sciences to combat papaya ring spot virus. And now we have this product that actually works, and it has now been launched, and it's now even incorporated into the agricultural package of practices that is put out by the University of Agricultural Sciences. So it's a very unique, first of its kind product in the world. And this is very exciting for us. So not only does it work on papaya ring spot virus, we have found that it works on tomato leaf curl virus, bhindi, yellow bean mosaic virus, several other plant viruses. So, and we're having a good success with this product. So that's a very interesting new product that we have developed from seaweed. Another product that we have developed from seaweed is for animal health. And this in particular, this was published in the Journal of Fisheries and Aquaculture Sciences way back in 2017. And you can see that with certain extracts that we have can increase the stress tolerance and vibriosis resistance in shrimp. Now, shrimp culture is a very big, shrimp export is very big from India, and antibiotics are banned. And so this is again a product that we have found that increases the ability of shrimp to tolerate disease, improves their immune system resistance. So this product is interesting, and we have just launched it last year. And that's another example of a different kind of product for animal health that can be produced from seaweed. Um, these products are, we also have a few more products like, say, bioplastics, where you have already made biofilms and biodegradable sheets and pouches, even straws, biodegradable straws from seaweed. This is all 100% seaweed, sheets, pouches, bags. These are all, and for all of these products, the cost of the seaweed has to come down dramatically in order to make these products economically viable. So while they are technically feasible, they are not yet economically viable unless the sea combine like machines come and lower the price of seaweed. Another product that we have demonstrated is that we are able to make crude oil from seaweeds. So we can take the sea plant biomass, in this case Kappa ficus here, and subject it to a process called hydrothermal liquefaction. So hydrothermal liquefaction is a kind of a process that kind of simulates what happens when biomass sinks deep into the earth. Instead of cooking slowly for millions of years at a certain temperature, if you increase the temperature and the pressure, you can actually arrive at the same conversions in a much shorter period of time. I would say this is like a process very similar to making artificial diamonds, right? I mean, you put high pressure and temperature, you can convert carbon into diamonds in a very short period of time. Similarly, at high temperatures and pressures, you can convert biomass into crude oil. And we've actually made this crude oil. It's a very high, and it's completely interchangeable with existing biocrude. It's a high quality, and so it's fungible. That's the term. So you can, if you can make large quantities of this biomass, then making renewable crude oil is very easy. Now, why am I pointing out this? Because we have all these refineries which are making petrol and diesel, and today they're using crude oil that is pulled out from the ground. So we talked about old sunlight and old biomass and old carbon dioxide. These refineries actually use that. But you can make the biocrude and put it into the same refineries, and you will get renewable petrol and renewable diesel. So, I mean, that's an amazing thing if you can pull it off. I believe this is not an unrealistic thinking, and hopefully within a few years from now, we would have brought down the cost of the seaweed enough to make these things realistic. So I will just stop my talk at this point, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk about C6 Energy, and I'll stop my shares. And if there are any questions, I'll take that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shrikumar. It was a wonderful talk, and definitely the audience, the participant, they have benefited out of this talk, and they will be motivated towards their career, like in which direction which they should move. There are different scopes are there. So yes, now with us in the panel, Dr. Punita. Dr. Punita from Environment Science. I will invite Dr. Punita to pick the question, because there are a lot of questions the participants were asked. So Dr. Punita can see the chat box and can pick the question. Yes, over to
Thank
Dr.
you,
Punita.
Jitendra sir. Um, Sir, it was a very informative lecture and a very interesting one as well. And the thing is that one of the participants has asked a question about pest infestation. Since you talked about viral attacks on plants, the participant is Neelaratna Das, and the person has asked, does ocean agriculture face problems like pest infestation? Can you please throw some light on it, sir?
Yeah, it does. Just like any other agriculture, even ocean agriculture has its own share of pests and things. You can think of whatever problem you can think of in land agriculture that exists
Okay.
in ocean agriculture. So that the issues are different. For example, there is pest attack. Instead of rats and rodents, you will have fishes and turtles eating the seaweed. And so the way we deal with it is that that is a certain balance of nature. And if you have large enough farms, the good thing is that they only nibble away at the edges of the farms. They don't come
Okay.
into the deep into the farm. So we can our losses can be minimized if you have very large farms. So we call it the fish tax, as we say. So we pay the fish tax, and then fishes are happy and we are also happy.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Uh,
Over to next question.
uh, thank you, sir. Now I will request Dr. Felix. Uh, Dr. Felix. Uh,
Yes, thank you so much, Nitin. It was really wonderful, Dr. Srikumar. It is absolutely amazing talk, and as expected from an IIT graduate. And you are actually not just an entrepreneur. That is what I really, congratulate you, because you are also into primary research. You are leading an active research group. You are publishing too. So that kind of spirit I haven't seen really in Indian entrepreneurs. Especially, this is a very good, step towards. What should I say, sustainable development, and and optimality criterion, I would say, because what is really happening in the world of science, translating that into the blue economy or blue biotechnology is really important. And you have really highlighted the importance of combining, the academia with the industry, because I'm really impressed that you're collaborating with the University of Agricultural Sciences, GKVK campus in Bangalore, one of the very prestigious campuses for the agricultural sciences, and you're publishing the findings with the GKVK as well. It's an amazing job you have done, Sri Kumar. I really must congratulate you for the contributions that you're making in the field. And it's amazing that today, being the World Oceans Day, we got a fantastic speaker in you, and really thank you so much for that. So coming to the questions, so we are actually getting a lot of questions here. One of the question is asked by Trisnehi Prathan. Trisnehi Prathan is asking, do sea plants assist in phytoremediation, or rather
Yeah,
phyco?
phytoremediation. Yes, you see, much of the, almost all of the fertilizers that we use and almost all of the effluents that we generate ultimately find their way to the sea. For example, if you're using fertilizers in our field, then it rains, it flows into the nala, and then from the nalas it goes into the river. From the river, finally it goes into the sea. So our coastal area, coastal zones in the sea are actually they have a lot of they can have a lot of eutrophication because of excess nutrients coming into the sea. And the good thing about the seaweeds, growing seaweeds, is that they can pull these nutrients out of the water and you can create biomass out of them. So in effect, you can recycle them. But the issues are also that if you try and work very close to the coastal zones and you have very large seaweed farms, it can interfere with the, let's say, the coastal economy, right? I mean, if you have the people want to use the foreshore for whatever swimming, whatever sports, or even coastal shipping activities. So you can't really have very large seaweed farms covering up the coast. You can have some seaweed farms, but what we are thinking is that while remediation is definitely a useful thing, for very large scale seaweed farms, we have to go further away into the sea, what we call over the horizon. So if you stand on the seashore and, of an average height of person, you can the horizon is about 5 kilometers away. After that, the curvature of the earth is such that you can't see over the horizon. And if you can actually have farms over the horizon, then you could actually, in our vision, you can have farms which are highly productive, and at the same time, when you go to the seashore and you want to enjoy that, there's nothing that's cluttering it up in the. So we visualize that we will have all farms offshore, very large scale farms offshore.
okay. Thank you so much for your nice explanation. And here in the course, I have a few questions. Here, participants have listed many questions that is related to the ocean pollution or the waste it is dumping into the ocean, and how it is going to affect this seaweeds and the cultivation. So I'll just name few of the participants' names: Salman Khan, Adam Abdul Kadir, Shamal Kuman, and Arun BP. There are many participants. They have asked in the similar line, when the industrial waste or the pollution and these things, how it is going to affect this this agriculture, seaweed agriculture, as well as this medanta?
Okay. That's a very good question. And one of the things that we have found is that if you grow seaweed close to where, let us say, the nutrient content of the water is high because of domestic or industrial effluents come in, the seaweed is actually growing much better. Okay, so the more nutrients there are in the water, the better the seaweed grows, the faster it can pull those nutrients out of the water and fix it into biomass. So uh, that's basically, in other words, it doesn't really affect the growth of the seaweeds as long as they're organic pollutants. Now, of course, it is possible that some of those effluents could have heavy metals and have toxic effluents, and those will, of course, not just affect seaweed growth, but would also affect marine life as well. I mean, in general. So there are strict norms against discharge of toxic and heavy metals into the sea. Um, but if you talk about normal sewage or industrial effluents or farm effluents, which are organic in nature, they break down in the water into nitrogenous compounds or salts, and they can all be pulled up by the seaweed and utilized.
Thank you so much, sir.
Actually, Jiten sir, actually, uh, along with this line of these questions, I just like to add some few questions, sir. Actually, it's very, I think it's very interesting topics. You, sir, you have explained to all the audience, and the one extremely challengeable things, sir, you are taking up. I think that sea cultivation is very challenging in such a way that the Indian scenario, lots of cyclones, tide, and our ocean is not stable, sir. Besides this particular pollution problem, sir, have you faced some sort of scenario like the tsunamis type of conditions? And if we happen to face this type of vegetations in the seas, uh, can you have you already planned it in such a line that if we happen such type of scenario in the eastern coast or the western coast of India, whatever wherever you are cultivating, uh, how will you crop up with the situation, sir?
Okay. So the seaweed farms that we are designing are engineered to withstand rough water. Okay. And I already explained to you earlier in the presentation that when we grow the seaweed in tube nets, the seaweed is very well supported so that it can withstand rough water and waves. In fact, we have tested it in waves of as high as 2 to 3 meters high off the coast of Kanyakumari when it's pretty rough waters. And those, they work very well. I'm not saying that, you know, nothing will happen in a severe storm, but it is always possible to submerge the seaweed farms a little into the water when there is a rough storm, so that the can ride out the storm, because inside the water it is much calmer than on the surface of the water. Okay, so that's a matter of engineering and design. It can be handled.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And now I'll request Dr. Punita.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Sir, a few of the participants, like they have asked questions related to marine pollution. As we know, oil spills or places where oil operations are carried out. Many a times it happens that the local biota is affected for that place due to oil spills. So one of the participants, Mr. Ram Deepak, he has asked a question: can we grow oil-absorbing sea plants near crude oil drilling operations? Is it feasible, sir?
So I'm not aware of any sea plants that will thrive in the midst of an oil spill. I have not come across this. On the contrary, I have come across reports where, because of an oil spill, an existing very rich uh, cultivation area for seaweeds has been completely destroyed. That
Okay, sir.
such an event happened in the eastern area of Indonesia many years ago. There was an oil tanker which spilled, and very rich seaweed cultivation zones completely became barren overnight. So, but I don't know if there are maybe there are seaweed species that can thrive in the midst of an oil spill, but I'm not aware of that. There's plenty that we don't know.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, actually, I forgot to introduce Dr. Milan Kumar. He is from Department of Geology. He's working with us. He's my colleague. And another person from the department, another colleague, Dr. Krishnakant, Associate Professor. He's also with us in the panel. So I'll request Dr. Krishnakant to pick one question from the pool. Yeah, Dr. Krishnakant.
Sir. Uh, uh, Good morning to all. Sir, it was very interesting topic. To me, it's a completely new subject. The first time I have gained some kind of information towards the seaweed cultivation in the sea coast side. Sir, I would like to ask you that how long it takes to harvest seaweed, like normal timing duration.
Okay. So this kind of seaweed that we are growing, which is vegetatively propagated, has a 6-week cultivation cycle. We plant about, if we plant a kilo of seaweed into the water, in 6 weeks it becomes about 5 or 6 kilos, depending upon the site conditions or growth rate. And so we harvest 80% of it, and then we can replant 20%, and it grows again. So it has a 6-week growing cycle. So technically, because the growth conditions are very conducive throughout the year, you can almost plant every day, and you can harvest every day after 6 weeks. So you can get a continuous supply of seaweed.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Jitenji, I'm sorry, I'm unable to see the list of the questions.
Okay, no problem, no
Okay.
problem, no problem. Thank you, Dr. Sekhi. Yes, sir. Some of the participants they have asked that this question is from Tushar Ranjan Mahanti. The question is there any national policy for sea cultivation in India?
So seaweed cultivation as a livelihood option is encouraged by certain state governments. So for the fishermen, it is considered as an alternative livelihood option. So in Tamil Nadu and in Gujarat, which are the two main states where we see a lot of cultivated seaweed options, there is definitely state policies that do it. But all of these are focused on making coastal alternative livelihoods. There are no policies as such which talk about seaweed cultivation and how we can go about leasing a certain area of the sea, and how do companies go and set up farms in the middle of the sea. There are no such policies yet, because I mean there are no such policies in India simply because nobody's come up and asked for some policies. But in other countries in the world, and India is not a very major aquaculture nation. We are not a very sea-oriented nation. We are a very land-oriented nation. We're not a. But there are other countries like Sri Lanka, Indonesia, for whom the sea represents part of their activities, because they have more sea, and they do a lot of other activities in the sea. For example, they do oyster cultivation in the sea, and then they do aquaculture, offshore aquaculture in the sea, growing. So they have policies. Those countries have policies where you can lease out certain sea areas or surfaces, and so it will take time for us to develop such policies. Right now, that is one of the reasons why we operate also in Indonesia, is because it's easier for us to develop technology, whereas most of our R&D activities, design activities, are in India, actually.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll now request Dr. Punita ma'am. Yes.
Yes, Shri Kumar sir, it has been a very wonderful lecture. Like particularly, like you started the lecture from source of energy. As we all know, the fossil fuels, they are exhaustible, right? So your lectures, particularly like how to harness the sunlight in a sustainable manner, that has been very an interesting point. that I think environmental scientists can look into it, and especially the plants that are growing in the tropics that can be harvested for it. I also appreciate like the work that you have shown in your Tanzania, Indonesia, as well as Rameshwaram for this, and the automated automation techniques that would improve our harvesting. And especially, I'm surprised by the products that you have told, like agrogain and agfort, for increasing the plant defense mechanism and increasing the stress tolerance among plants. So overall, it has been a wonderful lecture, and I have gained various new information from it. And I hope some of our research scholars they'll gain out of it and look for it in their project or research work in the future. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, sir. And
Okay.
I'll pick one question, the last question for this one. It was this question was from the Nilam Burma.
Mhm.
Can we prepare an artificial ecosystem similar to that of natural system to grow seed plants at an economical, profitable rate? So,
Um, it depends on what you mean by an artificial ecosystem. And uh, because at the end of the day, you still need area to capture the sunlight. Sunlight falls the way it does. And so, you can't capture it. The sun falls on the earth at say 300 or 400 watts per square meter. Okay. You can't then make a small area. You'll have to pick up the sunlight somewhere. So it is an area game. So you need large areas. Okay. So there's no getting away from there. Then the next thing is where will you go for the nutrients? The
yes,
seawater is full of nutrients. I mean, then you're back to all the limitations of land agriculture. Then you'll have to circulate that. Then you need a lot of power for that. So how will you get the power? So then when you start working all these things, then it may become uneconomical. So we don't know.
yes, sir. Because when you have a small aquarium, when you want to have a saltwater aquarium, it was really difficult to maintain that pH, that salinity, and these things. And when you are talking of in terms of agriculture, then it will be yes,
I
the
think for
economically.
research, it may be feasible to have a small ecosystem so that you can control the variables, so that you can really find out what is the nutrient or what's the variable that is really important. But from that is good for research. But to be able to scale it out, you have to go out into the open sea and you have to deal with that system.
Yes, so with this, yeah, that was the last question, and it was wonderful discussion with you. And
Thank you.
really, your talk was inspiring, and definitely it will be motivate. It might have motivated many of the students to think in that direction. And as you know, this year, the UN World Ocean Day, that the theme of this was the sustainable ocean. And
Yeah.
now we are actually at many aspect, different aspect, we are looking towards the sustainable world, and how in the future we can go ahead with all this population growth and all. So really this kind of initiative, this kind of work, it will inspire others to come up with different idea, different technology, and different products, so that we can manage with this population burst, and we can
Okay.
have a sustainable world. Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank you
your
very much.
wonderful talk and time to
Yeah.
spare with us and the Blue Planet lecture series. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
It's
you.
really
Yeah.
it's wonderful to meet you and
Okay.
to listen
All
your
right.
talk.
Bye bye.
Bye, sir. Bye, sir. Thank you so much. Doctor, yeah,
Yeah,
finally,
sir, I would like to add that, yeah, it has been, I was just looking back time in 2016, June is when we met in, sir is here.
Dr. Felix,
I don't see him
you are
now.
not clearly audible.
Yeah, yeah. I think my bandwidth is low. So anyway, I met, the Shrikumar in 2016 in Copenhagen in ISS, that is International Seaweed Symposium. And he has covered so many interesting facets today, especially about the four of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. He is concerned with the ocean, and wonderfully he has explained actually touched 4 of 17 goals. So, participants, if you are unaware of these sustainable development goals, I strongly suggest you to search it out. And as a citizen of this pale blue planet, the planet Earth, it's all of our collective responsibility to follow all these 17 sustainable development goals of the United Nations. And yes, so he has also touched upon the coastal community. So all these things are really beneficial for economically underprivileged coastal communities all around the developing, the world, especially the fisher folks in India. They're earning a very meager amount. So we really have to actually do something good for them as well. So he has covered so many interesting things, and it's really wonderful. Though I don't see him in the panel now. Perhaps he had went out.
No,
Maybe
No,
he was
he's
pretty.
here. He's
Ah,
here.
you're here. All right, all right. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. And it's a great pleasure to have you in the panel in the Blue Planet series. And yeah,
okay.
and especially you're like a role model for for the future entrepreneurs. And I suggest you, many of the listeners here, we have well over 1,500 participants who are actually live right now watching us. And I'm sure many of you will choose to pursue in the blue biotechnology, and the blue sea entrepreneurship. So let him be an inspiration. Let him be a leader for you to follow. And because it's very important to stay updated with the world of science and technology, So don't actually overlook what is happening in the field of research. So you have to actually find a solution, an optimal solution with what is really happening in the world of science, like what Dr. Shrikumar is publishing, as well as being an entrepreneur. So I think that's a perfect combination. Thank you so much, sir. I'm really
Okay.
happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye. Right.
Bye. And now coming to the next talk, let me share my screen once again. So as you can see that this is the news which I have shared you, all of you. This is a recent news published in 20th May, only 2 weeks ago. And Antarctic algal blooms, green snow mapped from the space. So the person here is actually one of the person I know very well. He's Matt Dave, and he is from the University of Cambridge, Department of Plant Sciences. And he has recently published work in journal Nature. It's a remote sensing plus ground validation. What you see is actually the Matt Devi. So he's based in University of Cambridge in Department of Plant Sciences. So Devi is with us at 2:30 today, and it's going to be a wonderful opportunity. Though he is pretty busy, and he is actually in the midst of shifting his a place to SAMS now, the Scottish Association of the Marine Sciences, where he got a tenureship, and he will be with us only for 30 minutes today. And I will see you all exactly at 2:30. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for your wonderful time, and enjoy the rest of the day.